Welcome back to the Chip Lunch Podcast. It is very exciting to be with you, whether you are watching us on YouTube, hello, you can see me waving to you, or listening to us just in your ears. Why are you laughing? You always laugh at me. Or
pause was so good.
because I forgot what I was going to say.
No, it's because you
Pause for dramatic
you bear a lot
effect.
of gravity in
Yes.
your countenance.
I love that description of me.
I love it too, Joel.
Sound like you're doing Christopher Walken impression or something.
What I need is
Did
more
someone-
cover. Right, well, here we are. Excuse me, here we are. At least I'm not eating on the podcast like I did last week.
What did you eat?
Same thing I ate just before. Those those
Pod things.
protein balls. Yeah,
Coffee
you thought they were
pods.
coffee pots. Imagine someone just munching on a coffee
Yeah,
pod.
it'd be awesome.
Oh, it's a bit dry and bitter, but you know, it'll work.
I needed an upper.
And what? Need a what?
Upper.
An upper. Oh no, I'm up enough.
Yeah.
I need downers. I think most of the time.
Yeah.
Like, make that guy shut up. Welcome, Braden, to the podcast.
Thank you.
Again, I like to. You've quite a few corrugated lines going on today.
Corrugated.
Yeah, got the corduroy and the corrugated jumper. Is that a corduroy jumper?
No.
What do you call that? A knit.
Yes.
Mm. Are you? Is that? You told me. You told me
Obsessed
that.
with what I wear.
I'm obsessed with you. That's
I
why.
can tell.
Corrugated knit.
I don't know. It's just, I do it on the shock absorber too. Just like we're wearing the same thing today. Like it's just a good way to intro
Bit of
what we're
cross
wearing.
promotion there.
Yeah, I probably need to stop doing it. Not the cross promotion, just calling out people's clothes. Yeah, it's been.
Well, I need to start paying attention to what I wear on a Friday.
Yeah, start paying attention to what I wear.
Oh, okay. That's a lovely hoodie.
Thank you. My wife bought it for me.
Oh, lovely.
Did she buy all your hoodies?
No,
Who buys the rest of them?
me. Or no, I think a lot of my clothes are bought by other people, but I tell them this is what I want.
Yeah.
Like at birthdays or Christmas or whatever.
Mm.
Books and clothes are the two go-to presents for me. If you guys,
Yeah.
if you guys are thinking of getting me something.
Well, yeah. That's not what I got you.
Yeah, what? No, you can't tell me. Spoil it. It'll be a surprise.
Yeah.
Okay.
So back to Joel.
I was going to say, there's someone else has been talking on this podcast, but we haven't introduced them yet. Why don't you do the honors, Braden?
Yeah, we have the pleasure,
Oh,
the absolute pleasure of having one of my favorite people on the podcast.
thank you for having me,
Mr.
Braden.
Joel Revival. We'll
Sorry.
get that merch eventually.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Mr. Daniel Gale.
Hi, Dan.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. It feels strange to be back here in some ways.
I was going to
because-
ask you, yeah, what's it like being back?
Well, it's a delight. Yeah, it feels like home in a lot of ways.
Mm.
But like 5 years ago, probably since.
I cannot
since we were
believe
at
it's
Soul
been
Revival.
that long.
Really?
4.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, 4 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. It was before COVID, right?
Yeah. Yep. 2019 was the year that our girls came. And so
Mm.
yeah, that was the year that we ended up having to move on from Soli's
Mm.
so that I could be a man, support a family,
Okay.
all that kind of stuff.
I think you still were a man prior.
Well, I probably was
Yeah.
in some ways.
Renee.
Renee had always provided for me before that point.
Oh.
So I guess by that definition, she was the man until that point.
Okay.
By
We'll
your
get-
definition.
I mean, speaking of which, we should get Renee on the podcast later. That would be
Yeah.
that'd be a cool
I'm sure
chat.
she'd enjoy that.
She'd be a great guest. Yeah. So what we are talking about is that you were part of like quite an integral part of Soul Revival when we first started.
I don't know about how very integral, but we were there for a long time.
Yeah.
Here for a long time.
Yeah. And you're also on staff.
Yeah.
And I suppose we'll get into that as we go. But I would like to ask you the opening question, Dan.
Yeah.
How do you like to eat your hot chips?
For me, it's simple chicken salt, but on the very much on the crispy end of the equation.
Crispy chicken.
Crispy chicken.
Crispy chicken chips.
Can I please get some crispy chicken hard
Yeah.
chips?
And they're like, what does this guy want?
Yeah. No, like, yeah, we figured out, we had a friend who we were once with who was ordering hot chips, and he said, can I get hot chips and make them extra crispy? I didn't know that was something you could say, but the person at the chip shop was like, yeah, gave him a nod like, you're one of the people who knows how it's done.
Oh, really? Like, I'd like my chips well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, every chip was my perfect chip that
Mm.
time,
Wow.
just because they all got some nice crunch. I just don't like a soggy chip.
Yeah.
No, the soggy chip's no good. We've and you haven't listened to any other episodes, right?
I
Oh, you dabbled.
listened to Lewis Part 2 on the way.
That's a good one. That was a good one to,
Yeah.
to listen to.
And I heard you say that you only talk about beefs if it's someone's second time on, but when Lewis said I don't have any current beefs, I was like, man, this guy is a different guy to the guy I knew 5 years ago.
Testimony, a
Lewis-
testament to the power of Christ.
Yes, Lewis 5 years ago was a walking beef factory.
Well, we know who your beef and part 2 with.
You and we're gonna have you and Lewis on the pod together.
That's
as,
right.
as the beef factory. That's what we'll call the episode.
I saw Lewis at Moore College last week, and
Oh, did you?
it was so encouraging just to see him.
Yeah.
Just
Don't you see him on the way? You're going on Fridays. Sometimes you're going back to the station, and he's going to college.
Yeah, the joys of having an 8 a.m. class and
Yeah.
being late to chapel.
I called him out.
He'll get there.
There's a ongoing battle on the podcast
Mm.
between chicken salt and plain salt,
Okay.
and Braden and Ethan are very much on plain salt.
And very
Oh,
much
chicken salt.
chicken
Chicken
very
salt.
much
Sorry.
winning.
Very much winning.
Yeah.
Because Sandy Bailey did a tally of who had said chicken salt, who'd said
From the podcast.
plain
Yeah.
salt. Yeah, which
Wow.
means she's listened to every episode, of course.
That's
And yes, unfortunately, sometimes you have to be in the minority, but you could still be right.
yeah. I mean, I just don't understand. It only makes things more delicious to add the chicken factor.
Yeah.
Are you a plain like crisps kind of guy as well?
I reckon I probably edge towards that side.
You just like saltiness.
Yeah. I'm a salty guy.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know.
Plain
Yes,
guy
I
too.
should say this is salty and plain. Thank you. I'm not the one wearing gutters on their clothes. There was, what was I going to... choose a different pattern, man.
No.
No, fair enough. Sorry. What was I going to say? Oh, salt and vinegar chips used to be my favourite. though.
Mm.
But that's like either or, isn't it? It's very like salty and vinegary.
Yeah.
It's like sweet and it's like sweet and sour, but it's not really sweet and sour, is it?
For me, chips, the more flavour, the better.
Mm.
Yeah. You didn't go vinegar since your mum is from England. We've noticed a lot of
Yeah.
English
their heritage.
influence.
will
As a
go
kid,
there.
that
We'll
was
go
her
s-
go-to for like I'd have swimming lessons, and we get hot chips after the swimming lessons.
Oh,
and sit by the
nice.
pool.
Oh,
Yeah.
after swimming,
Yeah.
that is a
Yeah.
good call.
But she would get chips with vinegar.
Ah.
But it didn't take me long to be like, Mum, there's just like soggy chips in a pool of vinegar.
It does. I reckon it would make it soggy, right?
It does.
It's like if you put too much. I don't want to put sauce on it, all the chips. I want to
Yeah.
dip
Yeah.
the chip in the sauce.
Yeah, I think that would be a better option.
Yep.
Yeah, especially if you've asked them for extra crispy. Then I think
What if you do extra crispy? How long does it take for a pool of vinegar to make it extra soggy?
I don't know. I feel like
Too
if the extra crispy's been done right, then you can't uncrisp it.
Ah,
Extra crispy forever.
wow.
It will forever be crispy.
It's almost like having salt and vinegar chips.
Yeah.
If you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, so do you have any sauce on chips?
If they haven't got chicken salt, just plain salt chips, then I probably would add sauce, which is probably barbecue.
Oh,
Yes.
barbecue. We haven't had as many barbecuers.
I'm all about barbecue.
Are you?
Tomato sauce, no,
Oh no, tomato
too
sauce.
much
as well.
sugar in it. weirdly sweet.
If you get the right tomato sauce, bro.
Oh, now you're
Tomato.
getting specific.
I can't tell if you're making fun of me.
That's like what I said, tomato.
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 T-A.
I mean, I live near Leichhardt and places like that now. So, yeah, you hear some good accents and
Yeah,
some
sweet.
good words of that nature.
I
with,
love
with
accents.
connection to food.
Yeah,
But
right.
what was I going to say? Oh, lately though, I've been getting into like quality barbecue sauces,
Nice.
and they've ruined your standard
Yeah, so that's
your
what I,
standard triangle brown bottle.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
pretty ruined.
that's
for
what I
me.
meant
Ah.
about Braden saying like it's too much sugar. Like if you get a good tomato sauce, even for example, like
Yeah.
it's good, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like Sweet Baby Ray's
Ooh.
is like you can get them in most supermarkets now, but it's an American barbecue sauce, and I just would always go that over your standard brown bottle that we all grew up with.
Mm. I think that's why I didn't like barbecue sauce because of the quality.
Mm.
I reckon if I was trying a good quality barbecue sauce,
Yeah.
I'd probably be.
Get some Sweet Baby
I mean,
Ray's,
it's like
bro.
when you have like a kind of barbecue sauce on ribs, like that's delicious.
So delicious. Since leaving Soul Revival, I now make ribs as well. I've got a smoker.
Ooh.
It's a good time.
I want to get a smoker.
You should. They're awesome. Do you know what I like about this podcast so far? I like that there's no topic that doesn't deserve a deep consideration.
Mm. I like that. Yes.
I'm amazed at how long we've been talking about barbecue sauce now.
I think it's a good one.
Yeah,
I mean,
cool.
it's a
Deep dive.
deep dive with Dan.
Into the world of barbecue
It's
sauce.
Dan's spin-off. Dan's going to do a spin-off podcast after this.
Yeah.
Or just sauces.
And actually,
Barbecue
barbecue sauce has been an integral part of my journey with Christ up to this point. It
An
hasn't really. I'm
amazing
joking.
segue
I'm
to
joking.
how did you become a Christian, Dan?
So I grew up in a Christian family in the Shire. Grew up going to the Anglican Church in Sutherland, St John's Anglican, and so there would never be a time in my life where I would have said that I wasn't a Christian. I didn't believe in God. Though when I was a kid, I think that probably just meant identifying as the good Christian kid.
Mm.
And so I had a very kind of weighty sense of whether I was doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And if I felt like I'd done the wrong thing, I would feel that very heavily. But I'm honestly, I believe there was a genuine faith in God above all of that, and it's just kind of figuring out what the gospel is as a kid. I think all kids kind of come into different stages of awareness of what the gospel actually means. But yeah, so I grew up going to St John's Southo, and there was a pastor there, a guy called Rod Harding, who's still alive, and but he's got to be pretty old these days. It's been a bunch of years since I talked to him. I hope he listens to the podcast. I know for sure he doesn't.
Podcast.
That's all right. But no, he baptized me and married me.
Oh, that's cool.
So there was a long kind of, it was a legacy of his investment in young people at our church, and I guess I would say I'm a part of that.
Mm.
Yeah, it's one of the things that makes me think that long-term ministry is just a really great thing. Not being too in and out of the community, but saying that, yeah, I guess I'm a pastor. It's something that people who don't know me wouldn't know. But that's I guess that's why I might talk about something like the length of ministry being a good thing. Anyway, I grew up going to Sunday school. I loved Sunday school. I loved church. I loved. I was the kid who put their hand up to every question in Sunday school and thought that I was being impressive and cool if I knew the answer. And yeah, I think there was a couple of formative moments for me in my walk with God. One earlier one was when I was maybe 12, 13, I think. My parents decided to leave St John's Southo and move to Anglican Anglican. And so there was a moment there where suddenly they were like, Dan, we're going. We know you really like this church. Are you going to come with us or are you going to go?
Mm.
Or sorry, are you going to stay? And for what I ended up deciding to do was to stay at St John's, to stay at that church that I was going to, and to my parents' great credit, they're now soul revivalists, as people who are listening will know.
Yeah, they are.
To their great credit, they weren't like, well, actually, it would be heaps easier for us if we always drove to the same place on Sunday. And all got into this new community together, and we'd really enjoy it if we could all do church together. But to their credit, they kind of stuck with that thing that they had told me that was going to be my choice, and they let it be my choice, and they let me keep going at St John's. And I think for me, that was the first time I ever was like, I don't know. I, as an individual who is a Christian, am making a decision, partly just because of friendships, but also just because I love my church. And
Yeah.
I want to keep going.
It's a faith-based decision.
Yeah. And yeah, so that was an important time. And so from then on, I was going to church on my own, like my parents were driving me. But and so youth group came not long after that, and I got some fairly significant youth leaders who were in my life, and those were guys who travelled with me from year 7 all the way up to year 12. And they were very important and significant people for my walk. The kinds of guys who really encouraged asking questions, really encouraged going deep with ideas, leaning into the chats, leaning into the difficult chats, making it feel like it's okay to have doubt and to have it's not like just instantly assume that towing the line on any particular issue is going to be where we're aiming for straight away, but to allow some ambiguity and some space and some time for someone to think through something.
You think you needed that?
I think so. I remember when I was like 17, 18, a bunch of the other Christian kids who I was around started having these moments where they were going, maybe I'm just a Christian because my parents are Christian, and maybe I don't really believe with myself and that kind of thing. For me, I think the fact that I had moments in my teenage life where I'd asked the hard questions and had people who were with me who weren't assuming that I was going to come out in the right place, but who were just allowing me to sit with questions and ask and ask and ask, and there was an ear that was going to listen as long as was needed. I think I just had a sense as a 17, 18-year-old that it wasn't just because of my parents' thing.
Do you remember what, sorry to interrupt you for a sec, but what questions did you have that you were kind of grappling with?
Yeah. There's a big one when I was maybe 9 or 10, which was I had a science teacher at Engadine. I'm outing him. And he's got a funny name, but I won't say it.
You can say it, we'll bleep it.
Well, okay. Mr. For me, that's a funny name.
Yeah, I think it's a funny name.
You gotta make
now
sure
you gotta find it and
you gotta
bleep it.
Yeah.
You gotta
Sucked in.
bleep that out. Ek.
That's Eck. Yeah, Eck will bleep it out.
Yeah.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah. So Mr. That was his name. Just making the X life easy. I'm going to say it one more time in 17 minutes.
Okay.
So he's got to find it. No, through COVID, I learnt a lot of video editing and audio editing skills.
Did you?
And so I now know how annoying that task is of finding a single word and fixing it a single moment in a sermon or something that you got to fix.
I would tell you that Eck does an outstanding job on it.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
The questions you were grappling with year 9 and year 10?
Yes.
That's
I had
right.
a science teacher
Science teacher.
at
Yeah.
Engadine High.
Mister.
And he used to out and out said, right, kids, next thing we're learning about is evolution. And evolution, just in case you're wondering, is basically the thing that disproves Christianity.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah, he said it in a classroom.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I remember being like, okay, that's a hectic thing to hear from a teacher. in science, and I really loved science, and I loved the world, like studying the world, and I was the kid who got a little bit of a kick out of like thumbing through like encyclopedias and things like that. And so I think I kind of felt like he was my people in some ways. But I had never heard it as explicitly as that, and publicly in front of a bunch of kids. And yeah, so for me that was all that meant. I don't actually even remember the ins and outs of it really, other than to say that those youth leaders of mine would have got probably 15 questions about science and the Bible, and whether they cohere or not. Over the months following that time.
Also would have been tough. He's kind of like, when the teacher says that, he's kind of also almost saying in front of everyone, "Hey, Dan, you're wrong."
Yeah, that's right. And I don't think he knew this, but I was one of 3 Christians in my year.
Okay.
With very few Christians at Engadine High when I was there. Maybe 10 in the whole school that I was aware of at least. So it did have a bit of that thing going for it. No one like ostracized me or anything after it, but things like that. But
how did you find being a Christian at high school? You said you loved church on the weekend, but how was it during the week?
Yeah.
Or just not something you really dealt with that much? Or?
No, I certainly did, because I was one of the only Christians, and I really loved church, and I felt really convicted that if I could get some of those mates of mine to youth group, that would be a really awesome thing for them, and for me. So for me, school, I had things like, "Oh, Dan, just like swear."
Go on, do it.
And I'd be like, "No." They'd be like, "Why can't you swear?" Because I love Jesus. No, I don't want to, whatever. "Oh, you're such a loser, just swear. Just say a swear word." But like, honestly, like when I say before that I was like one of those kids who like has a really kind of overemphasis on the good and the bad. Like I was also like, I remember reading through English books and there'd be a swear word and I wouldn't want to say the swear word that I was reading to the class, the English book, or which is like understandable in some ways, but also you just like, I was very concerned to doing the right thing, the godly thing, which is in some ways good and in some ways probably just meant that I was
a bit legalistic kind of thing.
Yeah, just living it out a bit of maybe not fear, but maybe kind of, this is what a Christian does, this is my duty kind of thing.
Yeah, okay.
So things like that, things like not drinking at parties and that kind of thing. I didn't get a lot of flack for being a Christian for the most part. Sometimes, like, it came up when Renee and I started dating, because she went to a Christian school and I went to a public school. And she... it was funny, in like our first few weeks of like dating, she was like, we're talking about creation, Adam and Eve and stuff, and I was like, I mean, I don't know, like, I probably wouldn't say it's like literal, the Genesis story necessarily, and at that time I was like, I mean, I don't like, were Adam and Eve even real people? Who knows? Like, it's a big, deep question, and for me, in my world of grey, it's kind of okay to ask a question if you know that you're like just working to answers slowly and trying to make things more black and white over time. But I remember Renee, she was like, what are we going to teach our children? Which 3 weeks in is assuming a lot about the relationship.
Yeah, well, she's obviously quite keen on you then.
we got real deep real fast. And, but for me, I think that led me long term to just a belief that like public school can be a really helpfully formative thing in some ways for a young Christian, given like, especially if they've got a community, a church that they love, and they've got peers who are their friends who support them,
going through the same thing,
going through similar stuff. That public school can actually be in some ways a good preparer for living in a world that isn't Christian for the most part. And that isn't assuming the same things that you're assuming, and that thinks that you're wrong about a bunch of stuff. Public school does in some ways train you for that life. I say all that, and but in some ways those reflections now are a bit different because the world's changed a lot since I was in high school. And so it's a different question now, I think, than what it was when I was at high school. Anyway, that's a side point. So the answer is sometimes it was a bit tricky.
Yeah.
Sometimes there were some real discouragements, sometimes some real encouragements. Like there was about 6 months where all of my mates came to youth with me, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
And then slowly but surely it was like just before the parties started getting
Ramping
more adult exciting, if you know what I mean.
More alcohol, more doing crazy stuff or
yeah.
whatever, yeah.
And so they started petering out. Yeah.
When we talk about some people that have grown up in a Christian family, they often talk about how it's like head knowledge, but maybe not as much heart to begin with. And like I'm kind of hearing a few parallels for that for you, but also other people say that there was like these moments where they had to take on their faith for themselves. You mentioned when you decided you wanted to keep going to Engadine Anglican. To Sutherland Anglican. Were there any other moments like that while you were growing up as a kid or in teenage years where you're like, oh, like there's a choice here, or I'm taking responsibility for my own faith?
I'm trying to think. I think most of my friends got an invite to Sunday school at some point, and there was no one standing over my shoulder making me do that. And so I think there was probably something in me going, that friend of mine really needs to know the gospel, hear the gospel, to be here and to understand. And it'd be really good for them to be a part of this thing that I love, which is church and a relationship with God. And I would pray genuine prayers. And I certainly wasn't like reading my Bible every day as a kid on my own or anything like that. But I think things like that are a bit. Yeah, when a young person invites someone to something or just shares the gospel with someone, in some ways I think it's the ultimate faith move. Like, because you don't have to. Yeah, no one's there over you. It's just you and your mate or whatever, and there's no pastor, there's no church, there's none of the stuff that might make you want to hide something or pretend that you're something that you're not. It's just, hey, you're my friend. Let me talk to you about something. And yeah, I did have one other thought, but I can't remember what it was about your question. Faith.
Just making the choices where you're like, I'm a Christian and I know the gospel. Yeah. Yeah. It's okay if you forget it. It's fine.
I think I do forget it.
Okay. What about coming out of high school? What was it like just finishing year 12, and did you have a plan or an idea of what you want to do? Because everyone likes to pretend that they do, but I don't think many people.
You mean like with regards to faith?
Oh, even just like what were you thinking about a job, or whether you go to uni, or what were you thinking then?
Yeah. So I got into a music degree, and I was very lucky, you might say, or blessed to get that, because my year 11 and 12, all I did was play guitar and hang out with my friends. That's all I wanted to do.
So perfect for music college, is that what it's called?
And that's university. Excuse me, Joel. The Sydney Conservatoire of Music is an arm of Sydney University. And
not a leg.
Yeah, Joel.
I'm joking. What con students used to do, because it's like, I'm going to sound like a wanker for saying this, but it is Sydney's most prestigious classical music institution.
Right.
And to like people who graduated from that uni who would do gigs together following, the prank to pull on someone is to say, and let me just introduce Cameron. He's a recent graduate of the Sydney Conservatoire of Music, because he sounds so, like, makes that person sound like the biggest tool in the whole world.
I know you meant, that's Cameron, that's your mate, right?
Yeah.
So how many times did you pull that prank?
he and I especially, and my mate Cam and I used to have him quite a lot. Yeah, he'd go and just everyone round of applause for Dan. He's playing with me. He's a conservatorium student.
Like with that,
Yeah.
like the eye roll. Yeah, you know those guys, right?
Yeah, that's right. But so I got into that music degree, and I sucked hard at uni myself. I was the worst. I got in off an audition. I got a terrible ATAR, UAI, when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to play guitar and hang out with my friends. So I did that until I started failing stuff. And then I kept doing it until I failed enough stuff that I got a warning that I might get kicked out of the uni because I'd failed so much stuff.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And
why do you think you, like that, the first time failing, a few failings, you're like, that doesn't matter? Like, what did you not, is there any reason you didn't change what you were doing?
I think I probably wasn't ready for uni when I got to uni. I'd been one of the better students at school up until year 10, when everything's quite rigid about what you do.
Yep.
And then as things freed up in 11 and 12, and they gave me space to maybe do less work or whatever, I filled all of that space with stuff.
Yeah. That's similar. I did something similar. Maybe not that to that extent, but yeah.
And I remember a teacher saying to me when I was at school, like, some people suck at school until they hit year 10, and then they start going really well. And some people go really well at school until they hit year 10, they start sucking because they don't have the discipline or drive maybe to go good. And that was me. So I probably learnt bad habits in year 11 and 12. And I just wasn't ready to like plan out how to get all the stuff done for a semester. And I didn't really, like, I was a classical guitarist, but my favorite music, I was in a classical music institution, and so we're learning about Baroque music and Mozart and going real deep into like harmony and things like that, which are like very, very clever people dedicate their lives to understanding something like the harmony of Mozart. And I didn't care about it at all. Like, really, I didn't care about it. So literally none of the stuff that I learned, I really cared about at all.
Yeah, that's important when you want to learn something.
All I wanted to do was the guitar part. And so I did. Like, the guitar part was fun, and I enjoyed the practice and the getting skills and stuff. But yeah, it's funny. The subject I failed that nearly got me kicked out a couple of times was the subject where doing the homework was a part of the mark that you got. So 40% of it was doing the homework. Yeah. And so there was 2 semesters where I didn't do any of the homework. And so I would have to get like 95 out of 100 in the test.
Did you do it?
To get through? Nah. No. I failed a couple of times that subject. Anyway, and do you want to know what got me going good again?
Yeah.
I woke up one morning and I saw an angel standing. No, I'm joking. In some ways, that's true. I met Renee.
Yeah, I was about to say, I bet you it was Renee.
That's right. I met my angel.
You're my angel, you're my darling.
I was like, hey, you're someone who I like and who I actually like care to impress in some kind of a way. Yep. Here's the life I'm presenting to you. Would you like to be my girlfriend? And then I look at that life and it's like, I'm just failing all over the place. Not very impressive.
Except at guitar.
Yeah. And to her credit, she dated a long-haired hippie who just failed uni all the time.
She saw potential, Dan.
She did. And she encouraged me so much. She was like, she would rock up at exam time to get me through. She'd rock up to college. Like, one time she rocked up to uni like with a new pair of Ugg boots because she knew I wanted some Ugg boots, never had them before. And she was like, you finished your test. Here's some Ugg boots, you legend.
Wow.
Yeah, she was
That
awesome.
is so cool. It was very supportive, encouraging.
Yeah, and she got me through. Yeah, she did. And then I went to college and stuff later, and I was just older, a bit more mature, a bit more disciplined, and I could actually just say, okay, I'm going to sit down and do an essay and do the essay.
I look forward to that age.
But something we've talked about before, like I think that, like, so I worked full time for the most of the year after school, until I went overseas with my family. And like that was really hard, but it taught me discipline and like, you know, you put a bit of pressure on your time, you need to be organised. And then I went to uni and I'd learnt all bad habits at uni because I had so much free time. And we've talked about before how to a degree that was good for me because I got to do youth ministry and spend a lot of time with people at church and things like that, but also didn't help with the discipline stuff that I had to learn later. And it's, I think sometimes that discipline you don't learn, maybe it's a societal thing now, but you don't learn discipline until there's pressure on like all these different parts of your life. You're like, I actually have extra responsibilities now, I need to sort myself out. Is that kind of where you were getting with when you went to Bible college?
I think so. And caring about what you're learning about is also a big part of it. Being passionate about it, interested in it. And I was similar with like ministry. I say just like hanging out with friends and playing guitar, but like when I became an adult, like because I fully like was a Christian nerd kid, like wanting to be the kid who puts his hand up at the question at Sunday school. That was my early adult life, was being that guy too. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go to 3 different Bible studies and be on that committee and help run that thing and be a youth leader and all that kind of stuff. And so I just filled my life with everything except the study part. But yeah.
Was the conservatorium fun though?
I
remember talking to you and like there were some things you really liked about it. That was a long time ago.
Yeah. Some things I really loved about it and I miss a bit. Like I still play music, and some of the musos I play with are really amazing. Sometimes in church world, you're playing with people who aren't like the most amazing muso, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful actually, and it's very necessary. But yeah, I think when you're in a place like that, there's a culture of musical excellence and shooting to be the absolute best that you can possibly be, and it just means that you're having kind of some of the most kind of lovely musical experiences of your life. Just there might be one of those every week or two, just sitting in a hall hearing a kid play the thing he's been working on for 2 years or whatever. I say kid, a young adult, a student. So I miss the musical excellent part of it, and also just the friendship part. So the con it's really good for if you want to be like a musicologist or a music teacher, or if you are one of the 1% who could actually have a career in the classical music industry. But for the vast majority of people, they end up leaving and not really being qualified for much, except unless it's an education degree or like music tuition or playing. So what a lot of ex-con students would say is something like the best thing that you get there are other relationships that you make there. And that's not just like a friendships thing, that's a networking thing too. So the vast majority of the professional gigs that I got after the con were just through people that I met at the con, which is not an insignificant thing because you got to meet people in the net. We got to find a network somewhere. And so, that would be my argument for going to a musical institution if you don't have a network. That's not necessary these days in a lot of ways.
Tell me about why you love music so much. Tell us. Sorry, not just me. Tell us.
Tell Joel.
Yeah, I can go. Like last episode, you faded out for 5 minutes.
Well, Braden doesn't know a lot about music.
No,
it's probably especially helpful for him.
If you could
please educate him.
Yeah. No, Braden told me the other day that you were like just doing a bunch of stuff for Music with Sorrow Bible.
Okay.
That excited me.
Arts pastor, bro.
Yeah. Is that the official title? Arts pastor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's a very close word to another word.
Yeah, always need something to aim for.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know, I haven't watched the podcast on YouTube before, but my belly and I laugh and the whole table goes whole table shakes.
I had noticed, but I didn't know what it was. You've identified it.
It's my one pack.
It's fine.
Okay, I am going to fade out for a minute.
Okay, no worries.
Do we keep talking?
Well, tell me about why you love music so much.
I love music. For me, this world that God has created while fallen, He has filled it with truly transcendently beautiful things.
His fingerprints are all over it,
Yeah.
even though it's affected by sin. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you see a sunrise or a sunset, you see, I don't know, a beautiful tree, or you see a human being, you make a connection with a person. These are all kind of the transcendently beautiful things that a person can experience.
Can I just add on top of that? My
Yeah.
dad went to Yosemite National Park in California
I've been there.
last week. My goodness. Like, insanely how good that is. Like,
It's
just
amazing.
It's just on top of what you were saying. So
Yeah. No, and when Renee and I went there a few years ago, you're driving into the national park and you just like, you're just driving, and then you like look above the tree line and you're like, oh my gosh, there's these
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Well, because Dad was there, he saw it's coming into spring there, so it's been snowing up there. So there's all these waterfalls everywhere.
That sounds pretty beautiful.
That was insane. I'll show you the pictures later.
Yeah, that sounds great.
But yeah, that's just another example of what you're saying, that just God, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I guess music is just one of the. It's probably I would say the most significant, transcendently beautiful experience of the world that God has made that I experience in my day-to-day life, or that I have experienced. Aside from family connection and like your relationship with your wife or things like that are.
Well, it has that ability to move us so much emotionally, doesn't it?
That's right. And it connects people, and it's music and food, I reckon, maybe the two, maybe art, but those three things I think are just, I'm sure there's more. You've got to be careful when you make a list. But those are the things that come to mind for me when you think about some things that just instantly draw a person out of their head, or out of just thinking and thoughts to feeling something, and to feeling through experiences. And so it's one of the reasons I really believe that food in ministry is really good. It's one of the things that I really love about Soul Revival, because you sit across the table from someone and have a chat with them, and there's no food. You can still have a great chat with a person, but the instant that you're sharing a meal, it just, there's something about it just brings you a bit more into that heart and feeling and experiencing space, which just means you're a bit more open to a person, I think. For me, music is that. It's also a window into like other cultures I really love. As a classical guitar kid, I fell in love with like Spanish culture and South American culture, and so the music was a window, I guess, into culture. I just love it. Yeah, it's got a capacity to move me that not many other things in life do. And then if you take it into the worship space, like music in the non-worship space is a transcendently beautiful experience that God has given us. And the tricky thing there is like a lot of the music that we listen to isn't made with the purpose of honoring God. But then if we get into the worship space, it is just an amazing gift from God that we can not only know about him, but experience him through doing some of the things that he's given us. And music's one of the really beautiful ways that he's given us to kind of worship, to love him in a meaning-filled, heart-filled, expressive way.
It's a good way to know. It's one of the real impactful ways to know God, I think. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned food and music, because it's kind of like, and like it was a window into other cultures, because it's kind of like with music and food, like the very underlying base level is exactly the same. Yeah. It's just like how God has made us differently to interpret that differently and to express it differently. And I think, this is getting really deep, but it's kind of like, and you talk about the fingerprints of God leaving on the earth, but it's also just like a window into knowing God's, just like a tiny piece of what like God's omnipotence and power is. I think because that's what He's created the world to be, and because He's a created God. And this is a discussion I had with someone a long time ago, a week away. Was like, originally I used to think like someone being creative was just like if you could do music or you could paint or you could do art, but it's not, because if we're made in the image of God, then we can be creative in lots of different ways. Like I used to love when I was coaching football, trying to be creative with tactics, but I wasn't painting, but I was doing something else that God's created us to be in that sense. So yeah, I feel like that's where music speaks to you a lot in that sense. Because I like really respect and value your ability to play music too, because I think it was a really great gift here at Soul Revival as well. How much time do you spend on music now? Because you're busy. you're a pastor.
Way less than I used to.
You're a pastor and a husband and a dad of 3. Like, do you still get time to have that creative outlet to like? Is it helpful for you to have a break by doing that?
Yeah, it is helpful, and I don't get to do it like that much. So I've got my band that I play in, and
what's the band? The
band is called Aslandia, and I love my band, like the members, and I love the music that we play. And there's 9 of us, and we live all over Sydney, and a bunch of us are in full-time ministry, and so that means that all of us are time poor. Yeah. And so getting together, playing gigs, that stuff can be hard. But when we do to get together, it's a true joy. And so there's that. But apart from that, way less. There's times, so my probably my ultimate like self-love, let's just kind of
take a break from everything.
Take a breath and reorient, is to like light a fire in a backyard or something and sit down, maybe with a glass of wine, and just play guitar or sing or just or write music. And so I probably get an experience like every 3 to 6 months at the moment. It was a bigger part of my life before kids.
Yep. Speaking of like putting more responsibilities on us and being more disciplined with that.
Yeah.
Do you reckon it'd be more helpful for you to find, if you were able to find more time to do that?
Yeah, I'd love that. I really love having real little kids. Got 3 toddlers.
Yeah.
And at the same time, as a parent, you look forward to the time that things will chill out just a little bit when they go to school or whatever, and you can find an hour here or there just every now and again. It's not to say that parenting ever gets easier, but
there are bits that get easier and then it gets harder in some other area.
That's right. And so sleep and kind of just a little bit more manageability about time. I look forward to a day where I could just sit down with my guitar a bit more regularly and write, and express and that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't get to play as much as I used to. Anytime I play in church as well, obviously I'm playing, but
yeah. It's slightly different. It's not, like you said, you're serving everyone else by doing that rather than serving yourself, which you need to do to a certain degree, I think.
Yeah.
So you've also mentioned Renee and your girls or your kids as well. Talk about how you and Renee met, and like we'll come back to other things, like you going to Bible college and things like that and becoming a pastor and all that. But talk about Renee, and you've already related a really lovely story about her, and she's a lovely person. What kind of like impact has she had on your life, and what has God taught you through being obviously boyfriend and girlfriend and then getting married? First wedding at Soul Revival.
Yeah, it was the first wedding at Soul Revival. Yeah. First wedding in the factory.
Sorry, I should say that. Yes, that
Cassie
is correct.
and Pete got married the year before, and Jared and Haley. Both got married before us.
Sorry, first one in the factory.
Yeah. Yeah, Jared, if you listened to this and heard that, I'm sure would be raging pretty hard. Pete's a pretty chill guy, but that Jared, he can really... He's a bit grudgy.
He's spicy.
Yeah, that's right. he's also one of the godparents of one of our kids, so I can say whatever I want about him. No. What were we talking about?
Renee. Renee first, and then we'll talk about your kids.
Jared.
No, Jared. One of your kids, Jared.
So Renee and I were tricked into dating.
Ooh.
It's the start of our tale.
Really?
Which is, I had a mate who was going to her church, and he was like, we're talking about this creepy guy who'd been like cracking on all the chicks, and one of the chicks was Renee, and then he said, Dan, you should date Renee. And I was like, I don't know who that is.
Who?
But then a couple of weeks later, I visited his church, and we'd met for like maybe 10 seconds. She was holding someone else's baby, and it's like, hey Dan, this is Renee. I was like, hey, how you going? Yeah, good. Okay, end of conversation. And a couple of days later, my mate, he texts me and says, hey Dan, Renee asked for your number, can I give it to her? And he texted her and said, hey Renee, Dan asked for your number, can I give it to him?
But that actually
But neither of us had done that. And so I can't remember who texted who first, but we started texting, thinking that the other person had already expressed some interest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And a couple months later, we got married.
That's not true.
No,
Come
it's not
on.
true.
I know when you're joking now.
Yeah, that's good. You're dialing it in.
Yeah, that's right.
But we started dating, and yeah, and I think in hers, I guess, when I first started encountering Renee, I just was pretty struck pretty quickly by the depth of her faith and the depth of her knowledge in the Bible. A very genuine and deep kind of connection with God, and a real desire to live a life that was going to be kind of a big, radical, servant-hearted life for God, whatever that looked like. And so me thinking about ministry and stuff, for her, she easily fit into a life that we might imagine for ourselves that had stuff like that in it. She struck me early on as someone who was endlessly generous, who bore endless goodwill to everyone in her life.
Yeah, for sure.
And with her, there's no kind of she's got very little tolerance for the surface level.
Yes, and I love that about her, by the way, because I'm a little bit like that too. Mm-hmm.
And so she's always just really impatient to allow things to go deeper. All of those are things that I love about her. I think for us, all of that's always been true. And when my daughters were born, my two twins, for us, I won't go too deep into that story, but there was they came a few months early, and we were stuck up in Newcastle, and we were just about to leave Soul Revival. Huge shifts, huge challenges, and all the way through, she was just kind of this dependable rock of, this is hard, but God is good. This is hard, but God is in control all the way through. It's not to say there wasn't tears or struggles and things like that, but there's just never any question for her, I don't think, really, that things are going to be all right. Sometimes she might feel like she won't ever feel worried things are going to be all right. She might get over things not feeling all right at a time, for a time. But ultimately there's never a question. And I really love that about her. Yeah. She's a very strong person, and she's overcome a lot in her life. The fact that she's a beautiful mum, stable wife, stable, and yeah, she's just an enigma of amazingness to me. Yeah.
That's a great way to describe her. We do, just like we miss you, we miss her being at church as well. Because again, I think she was a great gift to so many people here at church as well. And I'm sure she will be where you guys are now. Hello, Brandon.
Hello.
Everything good?
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah.
Good.
Phone call I've been waiting on all day, so.
Okay.
Just so happened to come now.
That's fine. No worries at all. We're just hearing about Renee.
Oh, how good's Renee?
Yeah, that's what we were just hearing about.
Why do you love Renee, Braden?
Why do I love Renee? Because she is a massive ray of sunshine wherever she goes.
Wow.
True.
Those people don't come along very often, and when they do, you appreciate them.
Man.
It's awesome.
It lights up the room.
Yeah. She's going to be stoked watching this.
There aren't many people I know that bring as much joy as Renee does. So
Yeah, I agree.
she's very encouraging.
I agree. Yeah.
I agree. And tell us about your girls. You mentioned them just before, so they
Yep.
they were premature,
Yep, 3 months preemie.
and
And
you need to be up in Newcastle at the hospital there because is that called intensive care?
yeah, neonatal intensive care
Okay.
unit, which is like the bubble that they put a baby in, that like humidity crib. It's
Humidity
called.
crib, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, so it's a challenging and difficult and unique way to have kids, because it's before you feel ready. Not that you feel ready when you take a baby to full term, but
But you're not ready for that.
you're not ready
Either.
for all that. And also suddenly it's like, okay, I'm expecting the kid to come in 3 months, and then 6 days go by, and suddenly there's this living, breathing, tiny little thing that you're not allowed to touch, but it's dad. Suddenly you're a dad, and that's a daughter.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very strange, kind of discombobulating experience.
Mm.
But in God's goodness, week after week, He brought them to full and good health, such that if you met them today, they're just normal little girls.
They are.
Yeah, which is a really amazing thing, because a lot of people don't. That's not the way it goes. Either the babies don't survive, or there's just ongoing stuff that they've got to deal with as a result of their preeminess. And so, yeah, we're very we know the privilege of the journey that we ended up going on with regards to them. Yeah, I feel like the deeper we get, the quieter I talk.
Sorry, you just might need to be
Just
closer
need to
to
get
the
closer,
microphone. I can't reach
closer.
I can't reach the thing to
To the
turn you up.
microphone.
And what were their names? Sorry.
Layla is first, and then 2 minutes later
Yeah.
is Eleanor.
Yep.
And then 2 years later is Everly.
Mm.
And yeah, they're all gorgeous. Little Everly has been she's an early riser. She's a morning person.
As you were saying
Yep.
today, before we recorded, very
Yeah,
early
really.
riser.
Yeah, since we moved to Ashbury, she's been getting up at 3 in the morning every morning. Yeah.
Ugh.
Thankfully, the last maybe 7 to 10 days, that started to get a bit better.
Well,
So
that's good.
we're very thankful for that. But yeah, no, they're all gorgeous little girls who I love to bits. And yeah, because we had them all so close together. I think we've got 3 kids in our family, but they're all going to be at school in 3 years.
Wow.
So this part of life is going to go quick.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, that's like a 10-year part of life, having preschool, before school kids.
Yep.
For us, it'll be just 5 years. Yeah,
Mm.
and it'll be up and done.
What do you reckon God has taught you so far about being a dad? So I say so far because, as we said before,
No, I'm fully cooked, bruh.
yeah, you're
Fully
ready to go. Yeah.
Fully developed.
Done.
Happy Father's Day.
Yeah, that's right. No, I think what has God taught me about being a father? I think it's probably more than anything, you just, as you acquire responsibility in life, you acquire a new ability to carry that responsibility. And I guess in a chip lunch crowd, it's probably called adulting. As you acquire extra levels of adultness,
Yeah.
you kind of learn new capacities that you have in you to be an adult in things. And so, yeah, I think there's just when I was 18, you just jig an exam or don't do an essay. It's whatever, just hurts me. But these days, if you're doing an essay and if you don't do an essay, suddenly your kids are $2,000 of a subject of a tertiary degree poorer, and there's something weightier and more significant about that.
It's like what we were talking about before. Add responsibility. I always like this saying is if you want something done, ask a busy person. Because it actually, they're I don't have time to do that, but I can fit it in here kind of thing.
Yep.
So.
And I think kids, they teach you patience. And sometimes you are able to be patient and sometimes you're not. And when you're not, I guess that's when they also reveal to you bits of sin that you might not have been aware of when you weren't pressed and pushed in the same kind of ways that kids can press and push you. Yeah, I think for me there's just something deep and fundamental about when you're a father, Joel, you can either agree with this or disagree harshly.
That's
They're
they're the only
option.
two options. That's right.
I think when you're a father, it kind of tests the foundations of your life a bit too, because you're a Christian, you've got a faith, but suddenly you've got this other thing that you're responsible for, and you go, how important is all of this stuff that I think is right and true?
To teach them.
Yeah, how much do I care about them getting this stuff, and how much I think you kind of can be tested and challenged and also encouraged when you're like, when you sit your daughters down and you're like, let's read the Bible, or let's pray, or let's talk about this value that we have, or whatever it is. And those moments, I think the fact that you have a desire to sit them down and you want them to come to an understanding of those things too, it makes you realize, well, because you only want the best for them. You love them so much, you only want the best for them. And if you, like, say for example, you didn't really believe the gospel, you might be like, do I really care about this stuff for them? Or maybe I want them to think something else, like maybe more like the world in some kind of a way. But if the degree to which you care that the beliefs that you hold are taken on by them, I think is probably pretty close to the degree to which you genuinely believe those beliefs.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Well, just like we were talking about prior about music and food, how that would reveal some of God's character.
Yeah.
I think being a parent reveals some of God's character. Like, imagine what God feels.
Yeah.
When if that's what you feel, it would be like a tiny microcosm of what God feels about us.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think my faith has become way more sharpened since I had kids. Not just, I think you're 100% right. Well, do I truly believe this? Because everything that I do with my children, I'm going to church and doing this stuff. Like, there's that saying of, like, with children, more is caught than taught. It's like, if I'm not living it out, and by the way, I'm an utter failure as a father sometimes.
Yeah, me too.
But I always say, if God has forgiven me because Jesus died on the cross, that frees us up to forgive each other. And so every time I fail as a father, I think almost without question now, I go and apologize to my children and say, what I did was wrong. This is why.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I did this.
Yeah.
And I think that is possibly my favorite thing about being a Christian father, is that I feel free enough to do that, where I'm not sure if non-Christian parents might feel free enough to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't know if you feel this, but sometimes saying sorry is really hard.
I'm an over-sorrier
Okay.
rather than an under-sorrier, because I'm like, I want that person to like me.
I
don't want that
with
I don't
your
let that
kids,
person
but
down.
like,
Yeah.
if your kid exasperates you and you say something in a way that's not as helpful as it could have been, and you hurt them in a moment of kind of frustration or whatever, not like hurt them physically,
Yeah.
but the part of you is like, no, you made me do that. Like, you made me react that way. And so, like, I'm not sorry. Like, you should be the one who's sorry, because you're the one who, acted like a 3-year-old is meant to act in every normal way. So I think that's what I mean when I say it shows you your sin as well, because you're like, what is it about me in that moment that makes me not want to say sorry to the kid?
Yeah. And then you start thinking about, like, well, yeah, there's a lot of psychological stuff in there. There's like, well, how I grew up, and things like that, and how I react to my children. Yeah. I don't know if I'd go, well, you made me do that, but I think it does go, why did I just do that? I feel shame for what I've just done to my children.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. And then it's like, well, okay, I need to take responsibility for this. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've got a lot to get through, and you still need to leave.
Yeah.
I don't want you to leave, but you still need.
No, and honestly, not having had the podcast, are they usually this deep? Like, we're getting pretty.
I don't
deep.
know. I think you're opening up the floodgates, bro. I'm ready to go.
I'm very happy for them all to be this deep. I'm just like,
no, it's fine.
We're getting pretty deep.
All our guests are different, just like all the people in our church are different. So, and you're not even our church. And you-
Yeah.
Like I think
Universal Church.
that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Universal Church. I didn't mean to say be
More
like-
college student.
Yeah,
Holy Catholic Church. Oh, wait.
that's a good good segue though.
I say that, and I am still a more college student, by the way. I'm doing my master's right now.
Oh,
Don't-
okay. Well, again, a good segue though, because you finished at Conservatory in Music.
Yep.
And you,
we really didn't move further down the timeline.
oh no,
while it's
we've
going.
done. Yeah, well, no, yeah, we've jumped around. A little
Okay,
bit.
okay.
I wanted to make sure that Renee and the
But
kids
we
were
were
on
up
the
for another
podcast.
2 hours.
We went pretty
podcast.
deep. You missed out, bro. We went pretty deep into like the why you love music and what is
Ah,
music, what's the
yeah,
nature of music and
exactly.
church and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to listen to it.
Yeah,
'Cause you're not
I
on that
don't
part.
listen to.
So you're not
anything
on that
I'm
part.
Yeah, okay. Oh well,
Sorry.
I did walk past Jono on the way. To sing.
Yeah, my little
Your
bro.
bro.
Yeah, legend.
College.
Mm,
You finished Conservatory in Music. Did you go straight to college? Bob College?
No, I played guitar and taught guitar
Oh, talk guitar.
professionally for the podcasters. There's little, for very little money, but
I was paid somewhat.
yes, some people decided to pay me some money
Mm.
to
I was
play.
paid a
Sometimes.
piddling amount
That's right.
to teach these
Um,
brats. Sorry.
And then Renee got me my most lucrative teaching gig, just because that's kind of legend she is.
Yep.
For the young musicians out there, if you can get a gig teaching in a private school where they let you teach during school hours.
Oh, very good.
So there was a few years where I was like driving to like 5 different kids after school.
Yeah.
That's not a good way to make money.
No.
Okay. Because
Anyway.
you're burning it all in petrol money. Petrol.
And you just can't fit enough students into the time.
Yeah. And you got to travel.
Whereas if you can go like student, they leave, new one, student, they leave, new one. Anyway, after that I played and taught for a couple of years, and then coming to Sorovar was a pretty significant
so
part
we
of
haven't
my
talked
walk,
about that. Yep.
which was we decided to leave St John's, which Renee had joined. We decided to leave St John's, and we knew that we were thinking about ministry as a possible future for us. And so, but also I had some pretty big bugbears with the Anglican Church at that time. And so we really weren't sure where to go, where we should end up. And I just knew that I had some stuff that I really cared about for church, and I hadn't seen it anywhere being done in the ways that I really thought it could or should be done, in ways that really excited me. But it also just so happened that I had a lot of friends who had been at Gymea Anglican, who had then gone to Soul Revival, or were still around that Soul Revival network. And you guys had planted a church about a year prior. And there's a guy who I think he's been pretty important for Soul Revival. I'm not sure if you know him, Stu Crawshaw.
That guy.
Is that Ethan's dad?
Do you even
Ah,
he's still
Met
around?
him, met him a couple of times.
He's still around, that guy, isn't he?
Yep.
sometimes.
Ducks in
Episode
every now and
100
again.
coming soon.
But yeah, in him and in Soul Revival Church, we saw someone who was leading a church in a lot of the ways that we thought we wanted to emulate in our own ministry, and a lot of ways of doing church that we really believed in very naturally. And so we saw in Soul Revival a place that we could really easily call home. And we saw in Soul Revival and in Stu a person who might be able to help us as we journey through what it might look like for us to get into a life of ministry. And so that's what we did. I think we were at Solis for a year, maybe, before we got married, and then maybe the year after that is when I started YouthWorks, something like that. And so shortly after that, I became a student minister at Solis. So I was a student minister while I was at YouthWorks College, and then I continued to be a student minister, kind of acquiring days and responsibilities as I went to more college. And yeah, that was my college journey, and I really loved college, and some of my most precious friendships were our college friendships. I had a cohort of friends who started with me first year of YouthWorks and then went with me in my cohort to more college, and so they're really significant people for me too.
That's cool.
And YouthWorks and more. I mean, I don't know if you're interested in talking about the colleges, but they both achieve very different things, both very important things, with very different emphases. So YouthWorks, I think for me, at least at the time, was very much about the formation of the kind of a person who would make a good pastor. And more college, they're not interested in that. but it's there's also a very rigorous academic
Mm.
piece of that puzzle that comes in, and so for me, having both experiences was really good because there was the forming of the person, and then there was the forming of the mind that might allow me to kind of maybe helpfully go about pastoring from a firmer theological ground. Yeah.
And you reckon you worked harder at those
Yeah.
two colleges compared to the con?
In that I passed. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. For the most part, I actually look back at college life and wish sometimes these days I put more into it. Because I think just these days there's a bunch of times where I'm like, I know what I'm supposed to think about that thing, but I can't remember why I'm supposed to think it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got to go and do some reading or something just to remind myself of why I'm supposed to think that or why I do think that. Whereas I think if I'd gone a bit harder at college, maybe those would have become a bit more firmly ingrained in my heart and in my mind. I forget the question. Oh, did I go harder? Yes, I did. Harder than at uni, at least.
Yeah, and you're more interested in that, and you're like,
Yeah,
this is what
much.
And you'd clarified more that you wanted to go into ministry and
Yeah.
all that stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that makes sense.
There was one funny subject called philosophy. Not saying philosophy is funny, but
Take that, Seneca.
there's
Just trying to think of philosophers.
Yeah.
Descartes.
everyone knows that you
What's that?
can't fail the first philosophy subject that you do.
Do they?
No one ever fails it.
Why is that, Braden?
No, we were going to because we want to throw people under the bus. But for that subject, I got exactly 50. Which
Playing with
means that
fire.
for all intents and purposes, I failed, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But most of them weren't like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're being student minister here at the same time as Revival as well.
Yeah.
I'm just conscious of time and things to get through, so I was just trying to.
Yeah, sorry, I'll stop segueing.
No, there's no. It's fine. I like it when the guests.
You're a real
segue-
taskmaster in this
segues for
podcast,
me.
Joel.
I am. That's right. I'm taking over at some point.
Sorry, I'm still distracting.
Maybe after episode 100. That's what I might.
Cut us loose.
Yeah, the name has changed.
Joel Revival. Joel's podcast.
The coup d'etat has happened. I've taken over. What are when they in coups they take over? I'm distracting.
Yeah.
In coups they take over like the radio station,
Yeah.
the news. Like,
Yeah.
They take over the media,
Yeah.
and there's something else they take over so they can control the message. The
Yeah.
airports.
Yeah. I think the Jolie Bible
Yeah.
is a good name for that podcast.
I know. Was it the JHB? That's what we came up with. Joel's Hectic like the Joel's Hectic
Yeah.
Bible, like
Yeah.
Joel's Hectic translation of the Bible.
Perfect. Perfect.
Stores near
Not
you.
available yet. I'm
Pre-order.
still
Pre-order.
working on it, man. I've got to work through it. Yeah. What was it? Was it good? Were you glad that you went into ministry? Like, you're obviously still doing it. So.
Yeah.
No, I hated it.
Nah, I couldn't stand it.
So I think for us, I could easily have seen myself staying at Solis for forever. And in some ways, like I made decisions around like what kind of college pathway I would take, thinking that I probably would just be at Solis forever. But the year that I left was a year where Renee had just gotten pregnant with twins. So suddenly I had to support her and them in that. And Solis just wasn't quite ready at that time to put us full time. And so that forced our hand for leaving Solis at that moment. And so you find yourself at another church, and they do things very differently to Solis, and you find yourself missing Solis, missing your friends, missing the community quite a bit. I do think there's an extent to which, having spent 5 years in that church, almost, that I have kind of come out with a bit of a conviction that being purposeful about how you do church is really important, and being like having a clear goal and shooting for it.
clear strategy.
being creative,
Yep.
being strategic, trying to just like Stu would say, like see the hill you're going to take and figure out a plan for how you're going to get there. And you're going to need all kinds of different things in the background to make that happen. And I say all of that genuinely, and at the same time, I really I've spent 4 years investing in people and their brothers and sisters in Christ, and they're just like Soul Revival people. They've got their bits that are really encouraging and awesome, and their bits where they're struggling in particular ways or whatever. And ultimately, I like when people say, "What kind of a church are you going to plant?" Because that's like we're thinking about we're preparing to plant a church at the moment.
This is awesome.
And people ask, "What kind of a church you want to plant?" And in some ways, the answer I want to give is, well, here's all of this thinking and strategy and kind of beautiful stuff and exciting and fun things that we envisage. We might want to be a part of this adventure that we go on. And then another level, I actually just want to say, really, I just want to make a church. And what is that? It's just a group of people who commit to loving God and loving each other. And that can be full of bells and whistles, or it can have none. And when I was at Riverwood, I came to a genuine love and concern for these people, and you never put strategy aside. You never stop planning. You never stop having kind of a vision-y kind of goal-setting kind of a mindset. But you do ultimately just go, when there's people and they're God's people, they've got a genuine faith, they genuinely love God. That's a church, and that's a beautiful thing and a worthwhile goal to have.
They're still there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I can't remember how we got onto this. But
I was asking about ministry.
Yeah. So, I think the question was actually, do you like being in ministry? Something like that. Are you glad that you went into ministry? Yeah, my answer is a definite yes. It's really hard sometimes. And there are particular pressures about it. But for me, I'm the kind of person who, if I did nothing other than think about deep stuff and hang out at a deep level with people that I love very much, that's like a holiday for me. Like that's just the best thing I could spend time doing. And that's a lot of what ministry is. I love ministry when it's that. Sometimes ministry can be like rosters and admin and stuff like that. Those days I'm like, basically a big part of my ministry life is just trying to minimize how much time I have to spend doing those bits. So I can just get to the bits that I love. But I really genuinely love the bits that I love. And I genuinely love the people who I'm doing it with. Yeah.
Yeah. And tell us about, so you said like when you were at Riverwood, where you moved to after Soul Revival Church, you maybe wanted to go in there with a lot of Soul Revival ideas, and it was quite hard to implement. Is that what you're saying?
I wouldn't say that. I would say I went in having had what obviously Soul Revival. The tagline is we do things a little bit differently, or something like that. So it's not your standard Anglican church. So I wouldn't have expected Riverwood to become anything like Soul Revival is really, just because Soul Revival does do things differently. And we really believed and still believe in the ministry philosophies and in kind of and actually I would say they're more than ministry philosophies. I would say that they are biblical theological convictions about, a lot of the time. Yeah. It's not a biblical theological conviction to have a coffee van, but the things that might lead you to buy a coffee van come from very biblically deep theological places because of a biblical theological belief in hospitality or whatever it is. So all I'm saying is Solis to me is deeper than just here's some cool stuff that we can try. Yeah. For me, a lot of the reasons that Soul Revival is as beautiful as it is because I honestly believe that they're just doing church in a way that's really faithful to the Bible, and that will have good outcomes a lot of the time. So I was never expecting Riverwood to be that. And actually, like there were ways where over time, like COVID hit the year, like as soon as we got there, COVID hit. And so my job became video editor guy. I was the only young person who had any kind of knowledge of any kind of tech stuff. And so video editor, video taker guy, that was my job for a couple of years. And actually that was, you can see God's hand even in that. There was no one at the church that could have done that. Even things like a couple of months before I got to Riverwood, we bought a new computer. And we were like, should we get the one that's powerful, that can do video editing stuff well, or should we get the one that's not that? It's like, oh, I might like find some time to record something at some point. Can we justify like another $1,000, whatever it was, for this other one? And we're like, Renee's like, just get the more powerful one because you might want to do some recording or whatever. And we get there, and then suddenly every week my computer's going, just churning through,
exporting.
Yeah. So I really genuinely, I've got no trouble seeing why God moved us there. And over time, like the year before we left, we implemented a whole lot of, you would call them quite soul revival-esque things. Moving to teams with coordinators. A greater emphasis on hospitality. So at Riverwood now, they eat together every second week. Just putting some work into the aesthetics of the outside space, just third placifying the outside space a little bit. And honestly, even just those small changes, they did have a really noticeable, measurable impact on the community and on the ability of the church to be drawing people and helping people to feel like they belonged in the space. Also, I mean, Soul Revival is not monocultural, but I mean, this has changed significantly since I got here. I mean, you planted a church in Ryde that has a different look to it. But I guess the changes that we made at Riverwood were also, I think, a testimony to the power of some of the things that Solis believes in, to allow people from different cultures to also express togetherness and oneness. And to share their culture with one another in a way that is really beautiful. You give people space to hang out, and you tell them, share your culture with us through food or music or aesthetics or whatever it is. It's a really beautiful thing, and it's good for making a church that kind of kicks those key goals. Anyway, I'm getting into ministry talk now.
Well, just before I ask you the final question, I want to ask you, you're planning a church now. You're in the process of planning a church. How did that come about? And like, it's really exciting to know that, you know, someone that used to come to Soul Revival, studied while we were at Soul Revival, is now planning a church. So how did that come about? It's in Ashbury. Yeah. Ashbury? Is that right? Am I saying that right?
Ashbury. No, it's Ashbury. Yeah.
Oh, I'll make sure I'm going to roll my R's next time.
Right. So Renee and I, partly because we got to Soul Revival when it was a year old, so we weren't there for the very, very first, the golden time that people refer back to of like Stu's living room. We only got like a very little bit of that. We got there like when it was packified. When he got to pack.
Sponsored.
That's right. And but seeing from then we were here. We were very quickly. Stu brought us into the leadership meetings and into the thinking sessions, and he really kind of he modeled and showed us, and you all did, how to kind of navigate the messiness and the beauty and the fun. While trying to strive for a biblical vision of church, and for writing the ups and the downs, the encouragements and the discouragements of a church plant, and kind of seeing it through to being a viable thing. And we always thought that might be something that we might want to do too, because we really believe in it. We really enjoyed our time here, being a part of that journey and adventure. And so we always thought that we might do something like that. And right now I'm a couple of years away from being a rector, a senior minister in the Anglican Church. And so what I did is I knew that me being a senior minister would be a couple of years away, and so I started putting feelers out to see if people might want to partner with us in that kind of a process. One of the first guys I called was a guy called Steve Gardner at St Paul's Canterbury, and that was because I'd heard that they'd recently amalgamated, and there was an empty building in their parish, and that no one was in there, and that they might be interested in planting. And so I called him, and I was like, "Hey, Steve, we're thinking we might want to plant in a couple of years. We heard you got an empty building, you want to partner with us, blah blah blah." And he said something along the lines of, "We'd love to chat about it." And I went on long service leave, and while I was away, 30 new families joined our church.
Woo.
And so we're bursting at the seams, basically. And so we're thinking we might need to plant before 2 years away, maybe as soon as 6 months. And so very quickly had started chatting, and we decided that this would be a good thing for us to do, a good way for us to do a church plant. There's lots of benefits to it too, like there's a solid standing church, and there's a building, and there's a team, and there's money, and all that kind of stuff right from the get-go. And so there's so many blessings in that partnership. And yeah, so Ashbury is like it's like a quaint little suburb of the inner west, you'd probably say. Like almost every house in Ashbury is heritage listed. And so it'll never change. You're never going to see high rises go up in Ashbury. It's always just going to be this quaint little suburb.
That's interesting.
And so that just has an impact on the socioeconomics of it, and it costs quite a lot to live there because there's not a lot of quaint little suburbs that are quite close to the city. And so Ashbury, it's in the inner west, where we're excited about the creative community of the inner west, and using some of our music stuff to try and hit that up a little bit. There's a lot of young families who live in Ashbury, and so there's a really encouraging and good playgroup ministry that's been running for a long time that we're going to continue. And also I'm just excited. In about 6 months, we'll take a team, God willing, and start greenhousing, start that process of thinking through church together. And I've done that a couple of times at Solis for a couple of services and the church overall, and I love that stuff. So I'm really excited just to be like, sick, what's church? What are we going to be? Who are we going to be? Let's go away together. Let's properly become friends with one another. All those kinds of things are things I just love. And also my job right now is pretty cool. My job right now literally pretty much is like make friends and write sermons. So
play music.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretty cool.
So this 6 months is it's a bit slower than normal ministry life, because I'm currently, this might change, but currently I'm not actually responsible for any ministries. So I'm just kind of around making friends, and sometimes I've got to say some stuff on stage, but that's pretty much it. And that's pretty nice as well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Final question, because we're running out of time.
Easy.
What do you wish that you knew when you were a younger Christian that you know now as a Christian? Like, what would you tell your younger self, Christian?
I think an older me would say to a younger me, when I was that 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, one of the reasons I was just bumming around, I think, is a lot of the people who I looked up to a lot were musicians, and very cool guys who I spent a lot of time wishing that I could be as cool as them, and wishing that I could be one of them, and trying to belong in groups, and I guess all I wanted in the world was for some of those guys to look and say, yeah, you can be one of us, and we'll give you a couple of gigs, and you belong in our world, and you can be cool too. And I think one of the things I might do is I might go back to that guy and just say, literally none of the stuff you care most about in the world right now is going to matter at all. And the stuff that's going to matter to you is way, way, way more valuable and way more significant than a huge amount of the stuff that you spend your time worrying about right now. Just start getting on about the stuff that actually matters, the stuff that actually matters to God, the stuff that actually, if you really just push yourself and think, young Dan, then you realize the stuff that matters to you has nothing to do with being accepted by the creative world or the cool world or getting a song on Triple J Unearthed or something like that. Actually just your life's actually going to be about Jesus.
Mm.
And that's really wonderful.
Yeah.
And just go and get to that. Yeah. Stop worrying about other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty good advice for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Braden, would you like to do some final words before?
I feel like I've missed a big chunk, but
Oh, you missed
I
a
know.
bit. Missed a bit.
yeah. I don't know. I said Dan was one of my favorite people at the start, and
Has that changed?
it has not changed. I just love you
I had an
heaps,
urge to
and
tickle you just then.
you wish. Yeah, I just appreciate you a lot, bro.
You too.
Dan was, I think I had played a lot of church music when I started hanging out with Dan, but Dan taught me how to serve in music ministry rather than just rock up and play. I think that's a really big gift that you've given me over the years, and getting to hang out and play a lot with you is
a lot of fun.
very fun,
Yeah.
and we got to do a lot of different things and
And we have a
stuff
band.
together. Yes, we have
Has
a
played
band.
one gig ever.
2
It's
gigs.
not had a band. We
2
have
gigs.
a band
Flora.
called Flora.
It'll come
Mhm.
back. It'll come back. But yeah, like I think I just really appreciate, the learning from you in musically and having fun with that, but also sitting under your teaching and Fridays and being youth leader with you and a whole bunch of different things we got to do in life together. And like, it makes me sad that I don't get to see you every week, but it makes me
Me
very
too.
happy when I do get to see you.
Yeah, I love you a lot, Bray.
Love you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just like listening to your story and hearing about Renee and the girls, I think it's the fact that you guys had to depart. We left a big hole here at church. Just especially like you invested so much in ministry, as said Renee, but I know how much a number of the women in our church have spoken about how much they value Renee. So I think that's that's really come to the forefront of my mind. But also just hearing about how you, like your faith developed and you took it on yourself, and how you were always trying to ask questions. Like first of all, you was starting with answering questions, but then you started asking a lot more questions, and then we were talking about music and food and being a parent. And I think that like a lot of the stuff, you're willing to sit in the grey to figure stuff out. And I think what that's doing, and I think I'm coming up with the title of the episode here, is like you're revealing God's character in just the things that you're doing to yourself and also to other people by the way that you approach it. And I think I'm really appreciative of that. And I think I've really enjoyed this podcast.
Yeah, me
like
too.
you said, does this really get this deep? And I'm like, I love getting deep. Like just as I said with like Renee's, like, get rid of all the small talk. We don't need any of that.
Yeah,
like
this is her kind of podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we need to get her on.
Yeah. I think the title should be Renee's kind of podcast.
Maybe. We'll see. I'll make the final decision on that.
I think you should change it so that the guest comes up with a name on the fly
That's actually not a bad idea.
as the last words of the podcast. The sign off is
that's
like,
the final
here's
question
the
now. It's
title.
like, what would you call this podcast?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then
All right.
sometimes you honour it and sometimes you don't.
That's crap. No, not doing that.
Are you sure you don't have a better idea?
But you've got to head off.
Yeah.
As you said, but thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for making the trek all the way out here to record. We really appreciate it.
It's a long way back to the good old Shire. Feels like home, but no worries, my bro. Thanks for having me, guys.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's
We
been
always like
lovely.
to finish every podcast with a one way. So if you're willing to join us,
Long way.
thanks, Dan, and one
One way.
way.